Hi, welcome back to my channel. I am Keisha Anna Michon Dupree. I am a Black Studies professor, Black feminist geographer, your neighborhood Black feminist geographer, and the creator of Sojourners Academy, where I take my experience in college classrooms and I curate family study abroad experiences that are decolonized, that are Black diaspora centered. And so I wanted to talk to you today and my reaction to one of Don Lemon's streams. So I'm talking to you. We're about almost 3 weeks into 2026. So a lot has happened to Don Lemon since, like just in the last 7 days. There's been pushback about his reporting in Minneapolis and the beef between Nicki Minaj and the possible investigations by the DOJ. I'm taking you back. Like in Trump's America, a week is like 6 to 9 months. But I'm taking you back to Don Lemon's broadcast of the New Year's Eve celebration that he had in New Orleans. And that's what I want to talk about. So I'm a couple of weeks late, but as I like to do, I was traveling. I stumbled upon the broadcast. He had been advertising it, and I think I might have popped on about 7:38. And I had a ball. I had a ball like I was there. I was texting my husband. I was like, turn it on, turn this stream on, because it was really fun to me for various reasons. The thing that really attracted me to Don Lemon's New Year's Eve broadcast was the fact that I had spent a considerable part of my life in New Orleans. So there's kind of a New Orleans insider thing. There's some things that you might have missed if you watched it. And if you haven't watched it, it's a long episode, but there are just some sweet moments that are very memorable to my heart. So what is my connection to New Orleans before I get into this? And I should present it to you that there are 4 things about Don Lemon's New Year's Eve broadcast in New Orleans that I think that folks have to really, really see. And so before I tell you why you may perhaps listen to me, how I am eligible to bring you anything about an insider's guide to New Orleans and celebrations, is that I first arrived in my first plane ride from Maryland to New Orleans back in 19 Yes, I lived in the 1900s. But the first time that I ever took a plane ride, it was on my way to start my first week in college, and I went to Tulane. So hello, roll waivers. The Green Wave, I spent my formative years. It was the first place I had ever lived outside of Washington, D.C. and Prince George's County, Maryland. And so I really cut my teeth as being a young adult in New Orleans from my time at Tulane. But that's not my only qualification, because most people spend their 4 years and they leave, but I kept coming back. After I spent my undergrad at Tulane, I then got a job with Greenpeace, the environmental organization. And I talked my way into a job that I was very, I can say now, probably a little underqualified for. But in my work in that interview, got me a position where I was an environmental justice toxic campaigner for pretty much the entire southern part of the United States, like the entire, from Florida all the way across to California. And in my time, in my 20s, I was spending all of my time working to defeat toxic projects. And one of them, the most time I ever spent, the most significant time I've ever spent on my time at Greenpeace, was my work in Louisiana. And so even though I graduated, I had helped launch a campaign in Louisiana. And then I married my college sweetheart. And so he's from what we call the North Shore, the other side of Lake Pontchartrain. So when people meet me, they always think that I'm from New Orleans, like I'm from Louisiana, but I'm not. I am from the DMV, but I have spent, I would say, most of my adult life in and out of Louisiana. And now that I have in-laws, we're there at least once or twice a year. So I know Louisiana, and I know New Orleans in particular. You can consider yourself getting a treat from a New Orleans insider. Okay? Trust me, trust me. So the four things that you can take away from Don Lemon's New Year's Eve celebration, which was lit, was number one, every night is like that. Like that was New Year's Eve. So he was live streaming from a bar. I can't remember the bar's name. And it was a little chaotic in terms of the way it was filmed or streamed, because the camera followed him wherever he went. And so sometimes he was at the bar, sometimes he was sitting on the bar taking shots, and sometimes he went outside. He was all over the place. He was in one central location, in and outside of that bar. But as an insider, even though it was New Year's Eve, and people who may not have been or have never gone to New Orleans would think, oh, this is a New Year's Eve celebration, I can attest to the fact, although it's less and less as I get older and I bring my kids down, that you can find a party any night. That was December 31st, but you could go down in that area. It doesn't have to be in the French Quarter, right? You can be down in the area where the music venues are on a Tuesday at 5:30 p.m. and you will still hear the sounds and the joie de vivre. You would still feel the pulse of arts and culture and music. It really is people understand New Orleans is the home of jazz, but really it is a diverse, beautiful, musical place. As an example, one of the last times I went down as a family, I think it was last spring, and I got away and hung out with a friend, and we had tickets to see a classically trained artist, musician from North Africa, right there at Snug Harbor. If you know, you know. Port of Call and Snug Harbor is the place to be. And he was playing beautiful music. I was not familiar with him. He was playing beautiful music. And it was at one point in the performance where he played in his North African instrument and North African composition, he played St. James Infirmary. Now, let me break this down for you. St. James Infirmary is the bluesiest blues song you will ever hear. It is all the notes of blues, the slow sound and the pouring of the heart and the pain. I'm not paid for singing, so don't get all head up, but it's like, I went down to St. James Infirmary. That's the best I could do. Listen for yourself. I'll put it in the notes, but it is a classic old blues song. And this artist from North Africa, with his North African influence composition and instruments, played the heck out of St. James Infirmary. Only in New Orleans would you hear St. James Infirmary played in a classical blues/North African style. My heart was like, is this really happening? And I'm looking around, I'm like, people, do you see the artistry in this? Do you see the mixture of culture? Man, and that, like I said, any day, any night, you can stop again. Snug Harper, Tipitina's, you can stop and you're gonna hear music. You're gonna hear live music and all kinds of, in all kinds of artistry, rock, punk, blues, bounce. And that is what New Orleans is: musical. New Orleans is celebratory. New Orleans is happy. And even in the rendition of blues, it is a sound that just warms your soul. So number one, the live stream, chaotic as it was, really showed a piece of what a night is like in New Orleans. If you want to find music, no matter the day or the week, although I must say I am partial to a House of Blues brunch, gospel brunch, but anytime, any night, there's somebody jamming. Okay, somebody jamming. So the second thing is, if it demonstrated, if his New Year's Eve kind of told you anything at all, is that people were popping by. So like your regular New Year's Eve streams, even when he did them, when he was on CNN, he's an independent journalist now. The whole point of like New Year's Eve broadcasts are like people stop by. So even if you're watching Dick Clark's Rockin' Eve or whatever, I don't really watch most of that stuff, but there's, multiple artists. Sometimes you'll have a taped segment from someone to say hi, celebrities. And so the, Lemon Special did the same thing. They had the taped cameos of folks, of some of his industry friends, politicos, journalists stop by, the people that he worked with, and they had these taped segments. And then sometimes they would go to a live segment of where they were. I think I remember Stephanie Rule, anchor on MS Now. She did a taped, "Hey Dawn, how you doing? Happy New Year." But then they rolled it into a live event where she was in, I think, Florida. He talked to Jim Acosta, who was in Hawaii. So there were these little pieces that you see in a typical New Year's Eve broadcast where personalities would say hi. But the great thing about the live stream, like the chaotic live stream that, and I say chaotic in the best ways, okay, the best ways. But the interesting thing about them is Don had, these taped, appearances, and then he had people drop by, and it really created the feeling of family because those people knew each other. They weren't just, your typical, "Hi, I'm here," because he called my agent, which he probably did call people's agent. But the feeling and the camaraderie was really, you could feel that it was a vibe and it was real. So among the guests that he had, which goes to one of the other points that I wanted to make, is he had Big Frida, who is the iconic bounce artist, queen diva of New Orleans. She had Tank from Tank and the Bangers stop by. He had D.L. Hughley stop by. He had political pundit from the Bulwark, Tim Miller stop by. They were getting so drunk. They were getting drunk. But it felt like family. Like, it felt like they were mostly, D.L. Hughley is not from Louisiana, but they were all connected in this way as being Louisiana natives. And the vibe was so community and family like that at one point, Don was kind of in the group with, he was standing beside Tank and the Bangers, and Big Frida, and then I don't remember her name. I'm not familiar, and I'm so sorry because I'm gonna find out who you are. A woman they call the New Orleans Songbird, and so he was on there with them, and they're talking about food, and they're like, "Oh," and Tank is like, and Frida's like, "You got to come over for my brunch," and they're like, "Yeah, you got to have Big Frida's brunch," and he was like, "Really?" Like, "Yeah," and then they started talking about honey cornbread, and I was just like, I love this. There is no New Orleans. There is no New Year's Eve broadcast, okay, where people are sitting around talking about, yeah, you got to come past my house and have some honey cornbread. Like, it was a vibe. I felt like I had the right to stop by as well. Big Frida, I will stop by and eat your honey cornbread whenever you extend me an invitation. Okay. But it was a vibe. It was real. It was family in ways that, after watching these things over the years, broadcasts, that is real. It's not fake. This is like real organic. Like, I feel like at some point Don will be at Big Frida's brunch with Tank, and with maybe Tim Miller will stop by. Tim Miller was like an outlier in the artists that he had that night, but in the same vein, he's a Louisiana native, right? So if you didn't know, Don Lemon is from Baton Rouge, but he spends a lot of time in New Orleans. And if you've been to Baton Rouge and you've been to New Orleans, you'd rather be in New Orleans. But I'm sorry, Baton Rouge residents, I've been there. I know, home of LSU Southern, I know that, but y'all drive up to New Orleans too. Quiet as kept. Y'all drive up there too. So that second tip is the community and family vibe that is just unequal in a broadcast of that stature. You're not going to see I shouldn't knock other studio broadcasts on New Year's Eve, but you're just not going to see people swapping recipes or invitations to stop by. Related to this, Don used his platform not only to raise funds for the local children's hospital there, in memory of his sister, but one of the amazing things that he did, as the cameras following him back and forth, is that he brought, speaking of community and arts and culture, he brought in new, young, emerging artists from New Orleans that had never been exposed to an audience that size. There were thousands of people, maybe up in the 10,000s of people at some point watching his live stream. And we were introduced to a local vendor who read his cards. We were introduced to an artist who was painting a picture during the broadcast and presented it to Don. So where there were names that you all know, he was actually introducing people that you didn't know and really lending his platform to folks. And you don't really see that. And that is really a community way of operating, right? Bringing in your cousin. Oh, here's my cousin that does this. Got to meet my cousin that makes this. Oh, here's my cousin. Like, it was so community, so New Orleans, and I loved it. So I'm going to jump. I had another three, but I'm going to jump the third one that I want to talk about, that if you've been in Louisiana or in New Orleans for a little bit of time, you'll recognize kind of the dialect, right? So I guess it's clear it's in Big Frida's voice and in Tank's voice. Hey, baby, how you doing, baby? I could do it, but I don't want to do it now. But there is a way that New Orleanians talk that sounds like they're singing to me, that sounds lyrical, and they have their own ways of pronouncing things. Everyone knows about the Earl, that oil is Earl, so Burl, Earl, make groceries, some of those things. But the dialect to me is so distinctive, and it's really a testament to New Orleans' place geographically. So I'm a Black feminist geographer. I'm always going to throw a map at you. But if you look at where New Orleans is located, and it's a major port along that Gulf, right? The Gulf of Mexico, and leads in many ways to the Caribbean. And when you look at New Orleans historically, it has a very unique history and history of political governance that is different from the rest of the United States, or the mainland United States. We can also argue that Alaska and Hawaii also have a unique and distinct form of governance. But New Orleans, because it was colonized by the French and the Spanish, and then purchased, although people were there, we ain't gonna get into that right now, but we will, by the United States, that there still exists in its governance, in its parishes, what we call counties, there still exists Napoleonic law. Literally, Napoleonic, yes, Napoleon, French emperor, Napoleonic law. And so there's these distinct elements found in the dialect that you hear. Hey, baby, how you doing? How you doing, Shad? That sound like that is more similar to Caribbean than it is to American accented English, right? And when I was teaching, at one point I was teaching in the University of West Indies, St. Augustine in Trinidad and Tobago. And I told my students there, I was like, if you go to the US, you got to make a stop in New Orleans. It's going to feel like home. The dialect, the food, just the culture, the tropics, the tropical climate will make you feel like you're at home. And you will notice in the history of New Orleans that Caribbean-ness, which makes me call Louisiana the Republic of Louisiana, because it is so different than the rest of the United States, the mainland, that there is Caribbean connections that flow from the Caribbean islands into New Orleans. New Orleans was the most reactive to the Haitian Revolution. A number of the human traffickers, those who enslaved African folks, fled to New Orleans in the surrounding areas around Louisiana. And so there is that Caribbean culture that is distinct to that region, of which New Orleans is a part of. And you can hear it in the dialect. And I just love to hear Tank and Big Frida talk all night, and then the people that were there all night. I just love it. And there's nothing like it. It is nothing like it. And then finally, our fourth thing, I'm going to raise the name of Big Frida again. Can you tell him a fan? Can you tell him a super fan? Is the inclusiveness, as in terms of not just LGBTQ, but definitely LGBTQ. It is family friendly in that way. Now, there's a lot of Catholics in the area, but New Orleans must have like a, free zone that anyone can be who they are. They can present in any way they want to present, and people will accept you in the way that you want to be taken. New Orleans, like I said, has a party every night, but when there is something, when there is a parade, carnival, when it's St. Patrick's Day, when it's 4th of July, like you're going to see them celebrate in ways that include LGBTQ folks. The Pride celebration down there is epic. I remember going to St. Patrick's Day and it was epic. And that inclusiveness was shown through his live stream because of the acceptance of someone like the icon Big Frida, who people accept her without any questions. And so I love that. And then there's this moment that really touched me among all the moments that touched me, right? When Don, during the countdown at the end, Don turns to his husband and they share a kiss. And I love this for him, right? He could never ever do that, I think, on broadcast TV. And it was just really sweet to see that love is love. There's no judgment. People are free to be. And that is really, people think of New Orleans as this party place, and it is. But it's also about allowing people to be free and authentic and show up in the way they want to without judgment. So I really, really enjoyed it. I do hope he does this every year. Heck, I'm like, there might be another reason for me to go down. try to feel the vibes from his New Year's live stream. It was really amazing. And I wonder how. Let me know if you watched it and you have never been to New Orleans, because I wonder how, I received it in ways where it responded to what I knew about New Orleans. As a resident, as someone, a Black geographer who is always looking at the diaspora, as a music lover, the Black people lover. So let me know if you felt it too. Like for me, it was because I have been immersed in that culture for a while. Like it felt like a celebration of that I could easily walk into and just be in, be in the circle. But of course, those thousands of people who turned in were not necessarily New Orleanians or Louisiana residents. So let me know in the comments how you felt about it. But for me, it was definitely the New Orleans of it all. If Don had been in New York City on CNN, I would not have watched. I think he's freer now that he's outside of the corporate structure. And I think that the things that were said and done and talked about, I think there would have been censors and lawyers on his back. And so I really appreciated his liberation. I even envy it. Like I would like to be free from my corporate aspects of my job as well. But yeah, so I also want to offer this though. If you watched that and was like, oh my gosh, I want to go to New Orleans. I want to invite you to New Orleans. Come on, let's go. Let's go to bring everybody because Sojourners Academy is offering a family study abroad for spring break in New Orleans. Yeah. So we will talk about all the things that I talked about before. We will also talk about kid-friendly ideas. So you probably won't be sitting in a bar doing shots. But you can if you want to. But I have curated the family study abroad experience in New Orleans. We touched down at March 31st, chock full of family-friendly, decolonize, Black-centered activities and food and learning. It's going to be awesome. In the notes, you will see a link to get the flyer and to ask for information about the trip. Again, starting March 31st, you'll spend Good Friday there and be prepared to leave on Easter Sunday. We are going to be cooking. We are going to be talking to locals. We are going to be tasting fusion food like Viet Cajun food. We will be talking to elders, indigenous folks, and we will learn about the unique history of New Orleans from a Caribbean context. And as with all things that Sojourners do, there will be learning and fun and a kid's companion guidebook that offers an age-appropriate introduction to New Orleans and culture and decolonized look of things about the impact of transatlantic slavery. We'll talk about the changes that have happened to the city and around surrounding areas because of the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and the fight to keep New Orleans locally owned and controlled, the fight against gentrification. I'm just excited. I'm there all the time and I can't wait to show you the parts that are off the beaten path. The accommodations, I'm so excited. I just put a contract on where we'll stay. Unlike the last Sojourners Academy trip where we had our own specific hotel rooms, this time I'm renting out this beautiful house with bedrooms and bathrooms galore. And we can use those open spaces. The kitchen is open so that we can have someone show us how to prepare food. One of the hallmarks of the trip to Costa Rica last summer was being able to cook in the kitchen with Miss Josefina. As she talked about her culture and her experience. So we'll be doing that. We'll be going on a walking tour of historic Treme, which was really the heart of Black history and Black community and activism and liberation in New Orleans. We will be taking a plantation tour like no other. Now, I know, calm down, take a deep breath. I will not ever recommend any plantation tour ever, except for the one at Whitney. Take a deep breath. Keisha, why you got us going to plantations? Whitney is not your typical Terra. Whitney is designed specifically from the perspective of the enslaved. You are not going to be traipsing through the big house looking at the balconies. No, this is a plantation, a former plantation that has been designed to bring the perspective of the enslaved. We will spend more time in the cabins where they lived, the fields where they worked and played, the church where they worshiped, than we will in the big house. And so it is a beautiful memorial to Black lives. And it will also highlight the largest slave revolt in American history occurred in that area in the river parishes, called the Coast Uprising, the 1811 Gulf Coast Uprising. So all of these historical facts, but fun built in. So if you're interested in seeing, you watch his broadcasts, and you're interested in seeing New Orleans, and you had always said, I plan to go to New Orleans, join me and Sojourners Academy as we go to New Orleans and experience the culture right for yourself, jumping out of YouTube and right into your lap as we explore New Orleans and all of the contributions of Black culture. So in the notes, you will find a link to the itinerary and more information if you have any questions. And it's going to be a great time. So I hope you can join us. Take care.